Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're doing a topic that Brianna created. She created this month's rotation, and we're each reading something that we have written and then talking about it. So I'm going to read from my book called Eating Disorders on the Wire, Music and Metaphor as Pathways to Recovery. It's my book and music project, and I'm going to be reading the chapter. It equates different aspects of the eating disorder with different metaphors, and I'm going to be reading from the chapter Eating Disorder as Cocoon. So, and if there's sounds like there's some music in here, there definitely is, but I hope that it's not overwhelming. I will try to enunciate and project. Okay, sitting in a coffee shop / cafe. All right, this is the book. Here we go. And I'm reading Eating Disorder as Cocoon, parts of the chapter. Alright. Good. We are conceived and developed in cocoons. We thrive in the amniotic sac until we're big enough and strong enough and ready enough to break. We enable the waterfall that bathes us and propels us forward. And when we leave the only world we've known, we transfer our source of nurturance from cocoon to hand to breast to loving arms. Like a womb, I have wanted my eating disorder to cradle me. I've wanted to be wrapped up and held in it. I've wanted to hide away with it and grow into it and wholly become it in a place where no one could touch us. In seclusion, I would be able to let the eating disorder actualize its full potential. I had not yet known what it was like to be in love with another person. But after a sustained period of recovery, I have experienced the purity of being held by love, not by fear. I now know the difference between being held and being in a hold. And I now know that I had constructed my cocoon to constrain rather than to hold. I had been weaving together materials of my eating disorder's choosing. I'd been preserving my eating disorder with this finely woven, impermeable cocoon. My eating disorder's cocoon had no insulated heating source, so I was often cold. It had a hard surface, so I could never relax fully. It had a finite oxygen supply, which meant that I had to consciously regulate how much breath or life I was allowed to take in. My eating disorder's cocoon was made of reflective material, allowing me to see only myself and grow indifferent to and eventually forgetful of what may have been occurring outside. The longer I was in my cocoon, the more distorted and less appealing my memories of the outside world became. Another part. I had to be woken up. I had to be shaken and shown. Someone had to poke a hole in my theretofore impervious cocoon, render it porous so that I could remember and subsequently prefer a world outside of the one the eating disorder had constructed. And one day, without warning, a hole was poked. It could have been the weather, a natural disaster, interference from a wind-strewn object, or someone tugging at the limb on which I nested. But whatever the source, a hole was poked, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Tens of hundreds of cocoons all around me, each hanging in its own little nook or sprouting from its own little plot of land. I was shocked and disoriented. I knew now that I had the option of creating a nurturing space that would foster growth. I could barely tolerate the realization that my cocoon had been concealing this. But knowing in and of itself didn't magically render me able. In spite of knowing that this whole world of cocoons existed, I couldn't just break out and connect. I would have to work for it, a notion with which I became anchored and resentful. In addition to feeling developmentally unable, I felt emotionally ambivalent. As much as I longed to break out, a huge part of me still preferred the world to which I'd acclimated. My ambivalence intensified upon realizing that the cocoons in my field of vision hadn't necessarily been offered the same perspective I had, so who knew if they were even capable of being reached had I made the effort. But I couldn't go on this way. It tormented me day in and out, having to both see and stay. So with a single breath, a single affirmation, without even knowing what or who had poked a hole in my world, I began to regenerate the fabric of my cocoon. Cocoons are portals for reincarnation. They are holding grounds for complete transformation. You can make your cocoon any material you like. You can prepare it to direct your growth in the most fantastic way you dream possible. You can program it to enhance your strengths and survival skills. You can weave it to protect and nourish your divinity. And like a mother's water breaking, you can emerge as your strongest, most complete self. It took me a while to create new materials with which to weave my cocoon, but with patience, trust, and hope, I chose and wove accordingly. I created my cocoon with porous, breathable, and translucent material that would regulate the temperature as needed, material that would allow me to perceive vibrations of the environment in which I could not yet take part. These vibrations gave me a visceral reference to the outside world. Much like being in the womb, they offered me authentic and direct nurturance while in my holding place, readying me for the inevitable contact. I reconstructed my cocoon a little bit every day, and with each day, my lens widened, and I nested there. And that is part of the chapter on eating disorders and cocoons, and it's basically to say that you are not alone, and you have nothing to be ashamed of, and that often shame just accumulates and builds on itself if you keep it in, if you harbor it. So you connect with others, a lot of the time that shame just disintegrates. And connecting with others is definitely one of the most important things you could do in recovery. So that chapter kind of just serves to highlight that and to help you or help anyone struggling realize that they don't have to be as isolated as they feel, or that they keep themselves. All right, I hope that helped, and I will include some information about the book in the description video. All right, take care and see you next week. Bye.